Hey guys, what's shaking? This is Pat Pitboss again. Nice to see you here for traditional martial virtue, which is a conversation that we have on martial arts, combat, and the ethics and the morality that involves these things that we do, basically. Today, I wanted to touch upon something that we used to train a lot in Cali, which is the use of force continuum. You might be familiar with this term, you might not. The use of force continuum basically explains how much force is acceptable to be used in any given situation. You aren't allowed to just beat the living shit out of somebody who threatens you for no reason. That's a common misconception. I felt threatened, so I had a right to kill him. I guess maybe in some jurisdictions in the US or in the world that might be a possibility. But here we live in Canada, and that's definitely not a good thing to do. You will end up in jail. And it's a tough one when we train in a tactical art like Kali, or we train with weapons training, tactical training, or even like serious techniques like rear naked chokes, where you can do seriously debilitating techniques on people. You can fuck them up for life. You need to know what is allowed and what isn't allowed. So essentially, the idea with the use of force is that you are allowed to defend yourself legally with up to the same degree of threat that you are facing. Now, this came up in, I don't want to get political about it, with a couple situations in the US recently where there was, in my interpretation of these events, a literal lethal force threat on this young man who was being attacked by a group of individuals, and he responded with a lethal force threat. And according to the use of force continuum, that's allowed. That's an acceptable level of self-defense. If somebody is planning on taking your life, you have a right to defend your life with lethal force defense. Now, up to that point, if somebody is attacking you, you have the right to defend yourself only with the same level of force used to attack you. And I think this is a very important thing. I know some martial arts instructors, even in town, so if it's happening in town, I know it's happening everywhere in the world, where they actually encourage the young guys training with them to deploy weapons in the situation where they feel threatened. And this is a ridiculous tactic to be training your guys in. I don't know who would do this or why they would do this, but I've heard one young instructor giving one of his students accolades because the young man pulled a knife when he felt threatened, and he put it to another man's groin. Now, if you're training your students to do this kind of thing, you're a fucking moron, and you need to check yourself. Now, that being said, if he was in a group of 5 or 6 people, and all of these people had weapons, it is perfectly within his right to deploy a weapon himself. And I think this needs to be talked about when we're doing weapons-based training, like in the Filipino martial arts, or even striking. If somebody is in a position where they're verbally, intimidating you, or they are maybe even just shoving you, you don't automatically have a right to escalate into striking and to beating the shit out of a guy. It's out of the use of force continuum. And This, I believe, it carries over not only from the individual, like self-defense, but also for, I guess, political and like on a national scale. I largely abide by the idea of do no harm and take no shit. So my boundaries are here. My boundaries are clear. This is where I am. Please leave me alone. If you encroach on those boundaries, I will defend myself to whatever is necessary in order to keep myself safe. And I think that is a very important thing to consider in our society, where everybody is hot and everybody wants to scream and everybody wants to cross those lines into other people's areas. They want to impose their will without consent, and they don't even know that they're imposing will anymore without consent. They just figure they can scream and berate and perhaps even shove and attack without thinking that things are going to escalate. And it is a little bit of a falling. Or I read a book, what was it, the Little Black Book of Self-Defense or something, and or Surviving Armed Assault. I'm not sure which one it was, but he described what he called the Escalation Folly, where it's male ego in full effect, or ego in full effect, where a person feels insulted, so they insult more, and then that insult turns into an attack, and then that attack turns into a physical attack, and then the physical attack turns into an all-out fist fight. But at any time, you could have removed yourself from the situation and not been involved with that. And And these are important things to consider when we're studying martial arts. Why we're studying and who we're studying with, and the ethics that the people that we're studying are putting forward. Are they setting you up for failure? Are they setting you up for prison? Are they setting you up to get your ass kicked by teaching you false evidence appearing real, false techniques, pretending that they are high-level martial arts when they haven't really been in it? I just discussed this today because in some of the circles I swim in, or some of the online circles I swim in, I hear a lot of like really gung-ho militants talking about armed revolution and violent confrontation is a solution. And I don't understand what the solution is. You don't fight fire with fire. You fight fire with water. And fighting fire with fire is just going to make the fire huge, and I don't see any benefit to that. As opposed to what I teach my class is the first line of self-defense is not being where you need to defend yourself. Physically, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, whatever angle you want to look at that. If you feel you're in danger, remove yourself from danger, and you are not going to be hurt as easily. Don't be at the bar at 3 a.m. or 2 a.m. when they're kicking everybody out. Don't enter into environments that you know are going to be dangerous unless it's your specific job to be in those environments. So there's this book, it's called Aikido in the Dynamic Sphere by Ratty and Westbrook. And I forget which chapter it is, but they do discuss what's called the ethics of defense in combat. And they've got 4 panels, and I think this is a very important diagram that they put forward. And in the first panel, what it has, and this is a samurai ethic, old school samurai. So the context are 2 people that will potentially be dueling, or death, sword fighting. Death is a consequence. So in the first panel, they have 2 people approaching each other, and the one man on the left feels threatened by the man on the right, so he immediately cuts him down. And this is considered the lowest level of ethics in defense and combat. Obviously, a confrontation was going to happen, but he preemptively took the other man's life as soon as he knew the confrontation was going to happen. And that's considered the lowest level of ethics. The second panel, the 2 men enter, and the man on the left waits for the man on the right to strike, avoids this strike, but still takes the man on the right's life. He counterattacks and does a lethal force strike. And that's the second lowest level of ethics in combat. On the third panel, the man on the left is more of a pacifist. So he waits for the first man to strike, and then he injures him, debilitates him, smashes his face on the ground, but he isn't killed. So the first man proceeded with a strike in order to take his life, but he just injured him in consequence. And that's a higher level of ethics in combat. But this is all based off Morihei Ueshiba's philosophy in Aikido. The final panel is the man on the left waits for the aggressor to strike, and then disarms him and puts him on the ground uninjured, or perhaps incapacitates him in a non-violent way, which would be the highest level of martial ethics, which is traditional martial virtue. And Morihei Ueshiba, in his Art of Aikido, really emphasized the principle that our highest goal in martial training is following a do, Aikido, the way of harmonious energy, right? The do is a path or journey towards self-realization and self-refinement. And if your self-realization and self-refinement involves really fucking people up, or killing them or injuring them when they just cross a simple line, I think your real self really needs some work. A recent book I picked up just recently, it came out I think January 1st, was War Yoga here by Tom Billinge, and he talks about the Akhara wrestling grappling dojos in India. War Yoga, apparently the grappling art of traditional Indian wrestling, in combination with ethics and a code of values, outdates what we consider yoga stretching by almost 1,000 years. Like it's old school tradition. And to train in the Akhara dojos, or the grappling centers in India, you kind of had to participate in a moral ethical code of conduct, which included non-violence, truthfulness, non-stealing, continence, celibacy, self-sufficiency, independence, and non-possessiveness. internal and external purification, contentment, austerity and sensory control, study, and closeness through your divine influence through worship, or God through worship. Now, a lot of these ethics have been handed down, and now obviously they're very similar to yoga itself, like hatha yoga. But the principle of ahimsa is the principle of nonviolence. And nonviolence is a high ethical goal. When we learn self-defense, it's to keep ourselves safe. And some people learn combat and tactical techniques to keep a community safe from the monsters among us. And I think these are very important principles to keep in mind when we train, that our goal is a peaceful society. Our goal is to defend boundaries, but not to impose our will on other people's boundaries. So it's riding a razor's edge in a lot of ways, and I think it's a tough one to consider, but it's an important one to consider. How much our actions are imposing our will on other people, as opposed to we are just putting our position forward. And you can take it or leave it. I don't need you to accept my reality, just like I don't need you to impose your reality on me. And that could be physical, emotional, psychological, or spiritual realities. All of those. If you were imposing your will without my consent, you're a bit of an imperialist, and I'm going to defend my boundaries. I think that these are important principles to consider when we talk about martial arts. When I train with martial arts, I don't like the competitive attitude. I like the attitude of camaraderie. I like the attitude of working together for a common good, working together on a common hobby, fitness, entertainment, having fun. The old school kung fu schools would call it playing. Instead of sparring and trying to be the best and to win all the time, we're playing and we're learning in the act of playing. If you take a look at the natural world, small cats and small dogs, they wrestle. They wrestle all the time, and they're learning their self-defense and predatory skills by play. Even other animals, they're learning to run and hide and to dive and parkour, free running. They're learning their life skills through play. They aren't attempting to always win. And those ones that do attempt to always win are usually shunned by the larger tribe or the larger pack because they're bullies. They're straight up bullies. So if you're preoccupied with a victory mentality, with a bully mentality when you're training martial arts, you might be in it the wrong reason. And I think you need to follow a do or a way or a path that's going to teach you some self-refinement, as opposed to the constant struggle to be the best or the most dangerous or the scariest in the dojo, right? And I'm one of the guys, I've been there and done that. I sought out Kali and Silat specifically because it was the hardest core martial art I could learn. I wanted to learn to fuck people up. And then, after I became an instructor, I had a couple of my students cut people in altercations, and I felt horrible about it, and I took a huge step back from teaching knife because of that. That's one of the reasons. But I took a huge step back because a lot of the things that you train when you're doing serious martial arts are not meant for a civilized society. And if we choose to live in a civilized society, or we wish to live in a civilized society, we need to consider the virtue and the ethics that are involved with the things that we're doing. That's not to say that martial training isn't valuable. Fitness is valuable. Health is valuable. Being able to defend boundaries is valuable. Strength is valuable. But it needs to be tempered with empathy, kindness, and consideration. In the Hindu sense, namaste. The consciousness that's animating you is the exact same consciousness that's animating me. And I think these are important things to consider. All right. Thanks again for listening to my TED Talk, Traditional Martial Virtue. Share it with friends, like, subscribe, all that jazz if you like it, and keep coming back if you want to hear more. Have a good one.